Hello everyone, and welcome to video number 4 of our series on Shakespearean sonnets. This is going to be the solution to your analysis of Sonnet 138, which was the last thing that I mentioned you should do in our video number 3. So if you have not watched video number 3, and more importantly, if you have not completed your own analysis of Sonnet 138 first, please make sure you go ahead and do that. That way you'll be able to accurately use the solution to see whether or not you're on track. Sonnet 138 by William Shakespeare. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be. So the first step that you should have completed then is determining, based on each stanza, what is the overall theme that Shakespeare is discussing. And the first thing that I do then is I turn to my first stanza, that first quatrain, and I know that this is where Shakespeare is going to identify for me the main topic of the sonnet. And here I clearly understand that the central topic he is discussing is the fact that he is aware of his lover's unfaithfulness. And remember, we understand based on the number of this sonnet, number 138, that he is indeed addressing the dark lady, his mistress or his lover. And we find it interesting that he's not blind to this deception. The next thing I do then is turn to quatrain number 2, and I'm going to see, I understand what he's discussing then, but how is he discussing it? In the first way in which he talks about his lover's infidelity, his lover's unfaithfulness, is the willingness he has to accept these lies because they flatter him. And we're going to dive into more evidence into why exactly they flatter him. Then I'm going to turn to my third stanza, that third quatrain, and I'm going to ask myself, what is the twist that Shakespeare is giving in his discussion of the lover's unfaithfulness? And the twist I see here is that he explains why not only he is aware of her unfaithfulness and he turns a blind eye, but that she is aware that he knows, that he actively is not addressing her infidelity, and that both of them are accepting of this deception because neither has a desire to break that illusion that they have a relationship that's based on trust, or a relationship that is similar to the love that he talks about in Sonnet 116. Then I turn to my final stanza, which is that couplet. And this is going to be the solution to the problem, or the final comment that Shakespeare makes. And here, the final comment he is making is explaining precisely why he is so willing and why she is so willing to accept the fact that they are in a false relationship. And that is because this idea of feigned ignorance is more of a bliss to them than actually confronting the lies that exist between them. Now that I've identified then that central theme that I think I've picked up on, this theme of mutual deceit or deception in love, I'm going to go through each verse in each stanza and try to find what sort of evidence the speaker is giving me to use to see if my theme is correct or not. And the first thing I've done for you is I've gone ahead and completed Scansion for that first verse, just to remind you that this sonnet does abide by that meter rule of iambic pentameter. And I'm not going to dive in too much into detail on that because by this point in time you should be able to complete Scansion on your own. I do though want to look at the content of that first verse. And Shakespeare begins by saying this: "When my love swears that she is made of truth." And here this is simply saying that the dark lady turns to Shakespeare and promises that she is virtuous in terms of her loyalty to him. And this brings up a huge contradiction and an interesting one, right? Because do we really need to swear to something if we're genuinely telling the truth, right? Oftentimes when someone tells you, I swear I heard this from a friend, or I swear I only took this much, right? We tend to question whether or not they're being genuine, whether or not they're being honest. And so this is our first hint that Shakespeare is contemplating the sort of faithfulness of her words, and that we should be as well. Then I turn to my next verse, and here Shakespeare again clarifies this interesting relationship they have when he says, I do believe her, though I know she lies. He is fully aware of the fact that she is not telling him the honest truth, and he chooses to believe her nonetheless. And we're going to learn throughout the coming stanzas why that is. But the next thing I want to draw your attention to is this word lies. And this is where we need to have a good understanding of the language that Shakespeare uses and what it meant back in his time. And here we have an instance of verbal irony, right, where what is literally said is meant on a different level. So when Shakespeare says that she lies, on one instance, he really means the falsehood that she speaks to him. But this second meaning of she lies, meaning that she is sexually unfaithful to him, that she is sleeping around on him with other men. And we're going to see this verbal irony continue throughout the poem, that he is going to address the very nature of her infidelity, which is the fact that she's sleeping with other men in addition to Shakespeare. And we come to our next verse, and we should all be questioning Shakespeare why he's with her in the first place, because we understand the true nature of her deceit. And he says this, that she might think me some untutored youth. And this is going to bring our attention to the fact that he is fully aware of what she does, but he has this thinking, right, that he imagines that she looks upon him as someone who is too young to understand her deceit, too foolish, too unexperienced in love, and that is the reason for his blindness. Again, we see this continued here, unlearned in the world's false subtleties, this idea that it's common to have this idea of falsehood in love and relationships. And we're going to see that this is interesting because it's a complete total shift away from the love relationship that he has with the fair youth in Sonnet 116. And perhaps maybe it's a growth in Shakespeare that he's coming to understand more of what the world is like and the nature of love sometimes. I'm going to continue on then to my second stanza, and this is going to dive into the fact that now we understand that both people in the relationship are being deceitful to one another. And here we understand more in depth what Shakespeare's deception is. And the first word I want to draw your attention to is thus. And this is essentially saying that as a result of everything that has come before, I now give you new information. And so in light of the deception that is being done on the part of the Dark Lady, we see that Shakespeare has an excuse for, in a sense, staying with her, thus vainly thinking that she thinks me young. So he can put up with all of her deception, all of her falsehood, because in a sense, he's flattered by the fact that he views her lack of commitment to him as a way of saying, well, he's too young to understand these games of love. He'll never understand or be able to catch on to the fact that I am being deceitful to him. But we see in the very next line that this can't possibly be true, because he states, although she knows my days are past the best. So this is evidence to contradict the very verse that comes before it. So Shakespeare is very much aware of the falsehood of his thinking, the illogical nature of his thought process. And he's also fully aware that the Dark Lady is on the same page with him. So neither is blind to the deceit of the other. And here we come then to our next verse. Simply, I credit her false speaking tongue. And here we need to understand again what these words mean. So simply, in a sense, not meaning basic, but stupidly. So stupidly, I credit her false speaking tongue. Then we shift to that word credit. What does that mean in Shakespeare's time? And that means believe. So stupidly, I believe her false speaking tongue. So this is interesting because Shakespeare then is confessing the fact that everything he is doing is extremely dumb in terms of a healthy relationship point of view. And again, we are not forgetting our figurative language use. Here we see that he is personifying the tongue. The fact that the very nature, right, of its being is falsehood. So there's nothing honest or genuine about her. Then we come to the last verse in this stanza. On both sides, thus, is simple truth suppressed. So again, reiterating this idea that both people in this relationship are actively escaping the reality of their lies and deceits, because it's simply better in terms of enjoying the physical aspect of the relationship. Because certainly we can understand that zero emotional connection is being made here, right? Otherwise, from a logical perspective, Shakespeare nor the Dark Lady would stand for such a deceit. Turning then to my third stanza, I see from the very beginning we have this shift in tone, but. And this is going to, perhaps as a reader, maybe give me some slight hope. Perhaps Shakespeare now is coming to understand the ridiculous nature of their relationship. Maybe he's going to change something about it. But that hope doesn't last long. And I see that in the question that he asks. Again, this rhetorical question. So not a question he wants answered, but a question to ponder. And he says, "But wherefore says she not she is unjust?" And here, this wherefore back in Shakespeare's day simply means why. So why does she not confront or say that she is unjust or dishonest? So why doesn't she simply admit her betrayal if Shakespeare knows it and she knows it? But he also asks a question of himself. And wherefore say not I that I am old? And why don't I just admit the fact that I'm not the young man that I once was? Okay? Again, we have this repetition of the rhetorical question structure. So he's asking a question of her and of himself. Again, making sure we as the audience understand that both of them are in a place of needing to analyze what they're doing, really confront the negative relationship that they have with one another. And he comes to answer this question in the following verses. Love's best habit is in seeming trust. And here we need to understand that when we talk about habit, it's not something in a sense that it's something you do often. When Shakespeare is using this word habit, it means a guise. So love's best trick is in seeming trust. So again, we have this personification of love. And again, we have a shift away from this idealistic true love that we saw in Sonnet 116, and now a love in Sonnet 138 that is fully capable of being deceitful and, in a sense, almost a trickster. Again, we close this stanza with this line, "An age in love loves not to have years told." So then we have these two aspects of this love that he is trying to qualify for us. One, that it is deceitful, that it likes to trick, but also that it likes to ignore certain realities. For example, the reality of getting older. So there's this joy in experiencing ignorance. Now I finally turn to my last stanza, this couplet. And we finally have an answer for why Shakespeare and why the Dark Lady are content to be in a relationship entirely defined physically and seeming to shut off any sort of emotional connection or those emotional warning signs that they're not right for one another. And he says this, "Therefore I lie with her and she with me." So again, we're discussing this idea of lie as a word being used in two senses. So one, they continue to be false to one another, both Shakespeare and the Dark Lady. Neither is better in that respect, but also they continue to be physically intimate with one another, even though Shakespeare is fully aware that he is not the only lover in her life. And in the second verse of this couplet, he explains why. And in our faults, by lies, we flattered be. So it's the falsehood of their relationship that really keeps it going. Because remember, there's no sense of emotional attachment, but very much rather an emotional detachment in terms of how they approach their relationship. So I've gone through verse by verse, and I've pulled out evidence I can use to support this prior theme that I identified of the mutual deception in love, and I definitely see that there is a multitude of good evidence I can use to support what I've found. And again, I need to clarify for myself, have I chosen the right theme? I definitely have, because both the speaker and the lover show throughout the sonnet that they are deceptive, and they accept this deception from one another because it's mutually beneficial. So they are physically getting something out of it, but also Shakespeare as a speaker is flattered in the sense of being able to recapture his youth. We see this exemplified specifically through the use of rhetorical questions and verbal irony. So you recall that rhetorical questions are that persuasive technique I use, and they're not meant to be answered, and in this sense, Shakespeare's not asking them because he wants to change his behavior or even bring it to the Dark Lady's attention that he wants to change this type of behavior. In fact, it's very interesting. He never directly addresses her as he has done previously in his sonnets to the fair youth. And again, we have this play on the word lies, right? So they're both deceptive in terms of the words they speak to one another, but the Dark Lady is additionally deceptive in the fact that she is sleeping with other men. And again, my ending couplet serves to resolve this question for the reader about why he puts up with this betrayal, this deceit, and it's because it makes him feel good, right? They're both benefiting physically, but also he gets to benefit from a flattery perspective. He doesn't have to contemplate his age. He can pretend that he is young again, and that's the reason why he puts up with her deceit, simply because he's too young to understand it. Okay? And also both of them desiring to escape this reality. Her desiring to escape this reality, perhaps, that she is bound to him and him alone, and he trying to escape this reality that she is in fact unfaithful and deceptive to him. That's it then for video number 4. I want to give you a brief preview for what video number 5 is going to entail. And for those of you who are astute observers, you'll notice from the meme on the right that the next video is going to be entirely based on essay writing, and essay writing in terms of poetry. So for what we're going to do is work first on outlining essays for poetry, and I'm going to insist that everyone write an essay outline, whether or not they usually do, simply because we're in this new environment of distance learning. And this will help me in 2 ways. One, I'll be able to see exactly who's staying on track and up to date with the things that I'm posting, but also I'll be able to give you better feedback on how you should structure your essays, because I am going to have you write an essay from home that you can type and submit to me using one or more of the sonnets that we've already analyzed in these videos, okay? So nothing new. So the next video is going to be talking about why you should write an outline, besides the fact that I am asking you to, and then talking about sample essays. So 1, reminding ourselves of the format, and then 2, in quoting poetry. So all you have to do for now between this video and the next is make sure that you're entirely caught up. In the next video, I will go through a sample outline with you for a prompt based on Sonnet 138, and then I'll also be going through a sample essay with you. That way, when you go to write your own essay at home, you have a structure to follow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in video number 5.